From yeeting fish at the Queen to Sir Stephen Darkland screams, this is Maesterminds! Welcome back, everybody, to Nerdist House of the Dragon podcast. I'm Dan Casey, and once again, we're here to bring you the Besteros that Westeros has to offer with our weekly breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 2. Now, Episode 6, the antepenultimate episode, laid the groundwork for the explosive final two of this season. With civic unrest, passive-aggressive food delivery, and some unexpected barbecuing, things are heating up in more ways than one in King's Landing and beyond. We're going to dive deep into this episode in just a moment, but first, joining me as always on this small council is Nerdist staff writer, our resident lore master, and number one on my list of potential dragon riders, Michael Walsh.
I'm not going to try to claim a dragon.
Are you not much of a dog person?
I love other people's dogs, and I feel like that would also be true of other people's dragons.
But, you know, now that I mention it, I feel like dragons probably share more in common with cats, just in terms of how aloof they are. And, like, as we'll talk about, they have to deign to interact with you, or else you're going to get the means, in this case, dragon fire.
That's why cats are superior to dogs. You have to earn it with a cat. Dogs just give it away.
I tried earning it, and all I earned for my trouble was red, puffy eyes and a lifelong allergy. But, speaking of red, puffy eyes, are we going to be left in tears at the end of this season? How the hell are they going to wrap up everything in these final two episodes, Mikey?
Most likely in a way that upsets me. That's my guess right now.
That's us. I'll take. You know what? That is those are odds I would take. I'll parlay that with also you being disappointed in another book moment in at least the final two episodes, just based on how up and down the season's been so far. But
I will say this. I actually. During the week, I think to myself, they're going to screw it up, aren't they? They're going to screw this up. And then, like, right before the episode, I'm like, can't wait to see this. Then it's like the gods with the Targaryens. Flip a coin. Who knows which way it's going to come up.
Yeah, as soon as all my endorphins are released when I see that murder tapestry take the screen, and then I brace for impact and hope for the best. But, okay, enough preamble. We're going to break down this episode for you in just a moment. But first, folks, as always, a spoiler warning. If you have not seen House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6, this is your one and only warning. With that said, book spoilers will be kept to a minimum, but if you haven't seen the episode, leave now before you hear something well and truly shocking.
I need help, Alice.
Do nothing now.
All right, let's get into it, shall we? So, Mikey, let's talk about this. What were your overall impressions of this episode?
It kind of reminded me a little bit of last week's episode, and that there wasn't a ton going on. The issue here is that you can't have two of those in a row. I was mostly bored, except for when I was angry, which is not a great combination.
No, not what you want.
Not what you're looking for. There, as always, there's always some stuff I like. There are a few scenes here or there, some really good writing, and a few phenomenal performances. So it wasn't a total disaster, but I would like to see them rebound in the last two episodes.
So you'd put this firmly in like the mid-tier of episodes for this season so far?
It's at the bottom.
Okay.
I think it's
the very bottom?
Maybe the
flea bottom?
The flea bottom. Maybe second worst, third. I don't know. At this point, they're all kind of blending together.
I would still put. I think it was episode 3. That is still my least favorite of the season, with the last minute meetup in King's Landing at the Sept. This one for me, it was fine. It's just, I agree with you. It feels like they're dragging their heels, and I know it's not for lack of source material and story to tell. There's clearly so much to do, but they're very much just like running in place on some of these storylines, and maybe it's just because they're trying to save up for some of these big, shocking moments. And I think it's working against them. It's not working in their favor. There's a sense of, there's like a lack of inertia that is, I think, sort of making everything feel like it's just frozen in place. And like, I get where they're going, and I like a lot of what I'm seeing, but I just need a little bit more momentum to carry us through to the final two episodes. I mean, just historically, this next week's episode 7, I'm expecting big things out of. The penultimate episode is always usually where all of the crazy stuff goes down. But let's talk about what worked best for you this episode. Did you have like a favorite moment or something that stood out?
Laris Clubfoot. Matthew Needham is doing some incredible work this season. It's funny. It's almost as though the show remembered he was on the show and that he's really good in the middle of the season. And they're like, oh, we should probably give him some stuff to do. And as soon as they did, he's been phenomenal. That scene with Aegon, just an outstanding moment. And we get some much needed characterization to kind of explain who he is. We can get into that. You want to get into that right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. He talks about how he's born. And we met his father. His father was a good man. Lionel Strong was a good man. But he reacted to his son's birth not by just accepting him for who he was, but by thinking, this is sorcery, right? This is dark magic. It's a tough burden for a kid. And we also see him talk about the way everybody else in the world views him. They just view him with pity. They don't see him for all of his strengths. They see him for his one weakness. It does not justify what he did to his father and his brother. It doesn't justify a lot of the horrible things he's done. But it's so good, and it gives him more depth. And it also, I think, is a very subtle scene in terms of future plot lines. And I really liked everything that was going on. The only issue now with future plot lines is that this show is making so many changes that we actually can't anticipate what's going to happen or not in the future. The butterfly effect is going to be outrageous.
Yeah, this in particular felt like it was something that we've been waiting to see, because Larys has been making some subtle moves, nothing compared to season 1. And I think it was just really expertly done to see him clearly not gel with Aemond, because Aemond is not that Aemond is too smart for Larys, but he just doesn't trust Larys, and perhaps rightly so. Whereas Larys understands that he can manipulate and maneuver Aegon, especially now that he has this sort of unique perspective that he can empathize with him that no one else seems to be taking seriously. I mean, speaking of Aemond and Aegon, that was my favorite scene this episode. That sort of very tense reunion between the two of them. So yeah, Larys is definitely a contender, but I think that his plans won't bear fruit until probably next season. This is him playing the long game, and just as Aemond said, "Oh yeah, my brother has a long recovery ahead of him." Larys is inserting himself now so he can be this confidant, because everyone else is, just kind of sitting there and not really taking Aegon seriously. But Larys is very smart. He's like, people are going to underestimate you, but the only person who really understands what you're going through, me, the guy who you should put all of your faith into. But clearly faith is not to be had in many people in King's Landing right now, especially based on the Lannister family abroad, and also what we see during that small council scene. I want to start by talking about the Lannister family that we see, the Lannister army that we see at the beginning, because that affects the small council scene. So, Mikey, tell us about what we see here with Jason Lannister visiting the Golden Tooth, bringing his family's pet lions.
It's been a while since we've seen Jason Lannister, the haughty Jason Lannister, very different from his brother. He goes to the Golden Tooth of House Lefford in the Western Lands. It's a small but important castle because it controls the hill road between the Riverlands and the Westerlands. So in the same way, the Twins is really important. On a much smaller level, it's that kind of importance. It's a pass. It's a pass, and it's controlled by a bannerman to House Lannister. This whole thing about telling the Prince Regent to come in haste, that is taken from the book, but it's actually another character who basically says that to Aemon, and it's taken very differently. Aemon's like, happy to come, let's go. I love this scene. I loved them showing that Jason Lannister's on the march to war with a lion, which has to be fed. He's so stupid. He's so stupid. This is not a good episode for the Greens. Not just because they get outmaneuvered by Rhaenyra and Mysaria, but it's just some of their allies are just not the best.
They're in absolute shambles right now.
Yeah, and you also see, we were talking about the stuff with Laris. We see Aemon's limitations, where he doesn't see the value in a guy who he knows is ruthless enough to kill his parents and also is the master of whisperers. That's a guy he's turning into an enemy. It's just, as someone who's been rooting for the Blacks since the beginning, it's a good episode in terms of the Greens making mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, he was just steamrolling that entire council. I love that he just paces the room, much like a caged animal, like a lion with the Lannisters. He's just pacing that room and just demanding answers. You can see how cowed everyone seems to be, except for Alicent, but even she is by the end of this sequence. Well, I want to talk about that in a minute, but first I want to talk about his big plan to make an alliance with the Triarchy to break the blockade that is limiting supplies and trade coming into and out of King's Landing, which, as we've seen, is having a catastrophic effect on the Smallfolk. So what do you think about Aemon's plan to strike up an alliance with a bunch of murderous pirate kings?
We all died in the Stepstones. We never escaped the Stepstones, the Triarchy.
It's a Jacob's Ladder scenario.
Coach, I don't think we survived that crash. The Triarchy were the ones that took over the Stepstones and then kind of ruined everything, and Daemon went there with Corlys. The Triarchy, I would not trust them.
No.
But they do need a fleet, and Dalton Greyjoy is not answering anybody. This is actually taken from the book, but it's actually Sir Otto Hightower who is the one who reaches out to the Triarchy. So they are giving that to Aemon instead. I think Alicent is right. I think the rest of the council is right. Like, you invite, I think Cole uses the phrase alien invaders. But basically you're inviting an outside force that's already been a huge pain for the entire realm to come and help you. It's a can of worms, in this show. We say this every week. They do a really good job with decisions you make have consequences you don't know. And that's what I would be thinking here is, what are we doing when we are inviting these people that don't like us to come to our land? It
also echoes what we'd see play out later in Game of Thrones with the Dothraki and fears about the Dothraki invaders coming to Westeros. And in that case, the Dothraki definitely would be probably a bigger threat than the pirates of the Triarchy. But it's just interesting to see how dependent they are on outside forces for help. We've talked about this before, like the Crown needing to leverage things with the Iron Bank of Bravos and outside financiers, but having to rely on external people to help you break through a blockade creates a whole host of other issues, as everyone perhaps rightly raises. But I think Aemon is just so focused on the problem in front of him, and he just doesn't understand why this thing can't be done. I mean, it's also interesting who he's pushing away from him. He is definitely distancing himself from Sir Criston Cole, because I think he's like lost respect for Criston Cole after he has seemingly lost his appetite for battle after witnessing the horrors of Rook's Rest. And he's distancing himself from his mom, Alicent, the Queen Dowager, because he doesn't want a voice of temperance on his council. He doesn't want to have his drive for violence and vengeance neutered. He wants to have free reign to rule and hopefully push out anyone that would threaten that. So what were your thoughts on Aemon's state of mind this episode, and especially that scene with Alicent where she gets removed from the council?
Yeah, I really think that's a very interesting moment, because it's not totally clear to me if he is kicking Alicent off the small council simply because she is not a wartime consigliere, and he doesn't, or he just simply doesn't want her voice there to be talking about slowing down. And he might blame her for the fact that there's even a war because she's the reason they didn't just take out Rhaenyra immediately. Or is it more personal? Is this him acting revenge against her because of a terrible childhood? Does he resent his mother? Her struggles later in the episode and the way she touches his face and brings that up certainly makes it seem like it's more personal. There's a great little bit there where he kind of reacts with a little tenderness before brushing her hand away and sending her off.
I mean, she had that killer line, "Have the indignities of your childhood not yet been sufficiently avenged?" And
yeah, tough for the prince. Tough for the prince of the son of the king. Tough childhood.
Yeah, I mean, look, she was the first person to call for an eye for an eye, so he's just following his mother's example. So definitely a an interesting episode. I mean, was very self-effacing this episode when she mentioned that kindness is not a trait that seemed to bloom in her boys here in the Red Keep. And
the other half of this is him replacing Cole as Hand. This is another change. Kristen Cole in Fire and Blood remains Hand of the King, but this will allow them to call Otto back to King's Landing because he also never leaves in Fire and Blood. He sticks around, and I think that this makes sense for Aemon. If you're going to send Cole off to lead your forces, you need your Hand with you. The whole point is the Hand he can speak on your behalf. Yes. He or she can speak on your behalf, and also is offering counsel. And for as many mistakes as we see Aemon make, I think in this episode, the fact that he recognizes, Otto Hightower knows what he's doing, and he's loyal to his family. That's a great little line, to Larys. Like we don't have to question his loyalty to his family, showing that Aemon knows what Larys did at Harrenhal to his father and brother. Bring back. I can't believe I'm saying this. I am so excited for Otto Hightower to come back. The show is better with him. I don't like him. I'm not rooting for him, but the show is better for him the same way Game of Thrones was better when Tywin Lannister was around.
But where is he? I think we are officially on Otto watch because I don't know where Otto Hightower is. No one knows where he is. His own kids don't know.
Otto watch.
It's Otto watch o'clock, folks. Buckle up. The man himself. I know there's some Otto fan cams out there, but oh my goodness, I'm just so excited to see the energy he brings to this political clown car of a council meeting. So I'm sure he's going to take everyone in that room to task. And look, Aemond is right. You need someone that can help address the problems the realm is facing, and maybe someone who can beat sense into him, because and we'll talk about this in greater detail later on, but Aemond clearly doesn't understand why the small folk are up in arms. It's like classic, ask a rich person, how much does a gallon of milk cost? And they're like, I don't know, $10.
It's one banana, Michael.
Yeah, they're just so out of touch. And that definitely comes through in this episode. But I really loved the dynamic that we saw between Aemond and Alicent in the Green Council scene in particular, because it's just so uncomfortable. And it felt inevitable just based on how he kind of shuts down everything that she's saying, and because she is trying to pump the brakes because their schemes have historically not gone super well for the family. Honestly, the factor here that's the same in all of these schemes that haven't gone super well has been Sir Criston Cole. So maybe that's a good idea, but I don't know, Mikey, maybe you're onto something here. Maybe Sir Criston Cole isn't such a good guy after all.
Nobody's ever been more right about anything.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough week for the Greens, but it doesn't feel like things are going much better for the Blacks over on Dragonstone. Rhaenyra spends this episode sulking, slapping, smooching, and sentencing poor Steffan Darkland to death. So what are your thoughts on... We'll talk about Steffan Darkland of the Dragon Riders, but what are your thoughts on where we find Rhaenyra this episode? Specifically, her line, it is my fault. I think that you've forgotten to fear me. What do you think about where we see Rhaenyra this time around?
That's one of the few things she's been right about all season.
Yeah.
They have forgotten to fear her. They clearly don't respect her. I am, in much the way last week I was tired of Daemon's story at Harrenhal, although I came around a little bit on it this week. I'm kind of that way with Rhaenyra. My hope is that we are seeing the hardening of Rhaenyra in this episode, which is of the version of the character I've been hoping to see, the one who does have fire and blood in her. Those are the words of House Targaryen. But they're not just about the dragons. They are fiery people. They are fiery. They are hot-blooded, both literally and metaphorically. Right, the dragons and them. Let's go. Let's go. She is a more interesting character when she is angry and acting. I don't need... we get it. She didn't want war. Well, war's here. So what are you going to do? How many How long are you going to let this get out of control?
Yeah.
So I didn't love this stuff, but I do like that it feels like they are finally getting ready to take the next step.
I mean, she literally does by the episode's end. She's finally like, all right, I'm no longer going to stay shut up in this castle. I guess she already left once before, but this time it's for a smarter reason, to go meet a potential dragon rider. And they waste no time in introducing and expediting that plot. I think that a lot of folks that I spoke with, including friend of the show, Graham Sheldon, who does some producing stuff for us here, he was like, you can't end an episode with just a vague look at some scrolls and expect everyone to infer that's exactly what you have planned. This time they made it much clearer, albeit still kind of like tentative and clumsily. I was expecting a little bit more confidence from Rhaenyra with this, but it made me laugh because Stefan Darkland. Well, let's talk about him first. Why Stefan Darkland, Mikey? And you pointed out something to me before we started recording about his supposed connection to the family.
Yeah, so she and Jace decide that they want to at least believe the histories that you need some blood of old Valyria. It's not just Targaryen blood. Mm-hmm. You have to be from the Dragon Lords. So they go through the scrolls and they find out. They say that Sir Stefan Darkland's grandmother's grandmother was a Targaryen named Arianna. She's a creation of the show. She doesn't exist. This whole idea that they were concerned about blood is also something that comes from the show, because in Fire and Blood, they're just anybody can try. They're so desperate, and they're offering lordships, mm-hmm. and they're offering just people who have nothing are like, I will risk my life if it means I not only become a dragon rider, but I enrich my family. This was, I don't think they handled it super well. I didn't think there was a lot of, this is one's tough because we kind of know what's not good. We know it's not going to work out for him. I didn't feel there was a lot of suspense. I thought that it was a little silly. He clearly has not seen Pulp Fiction and did not follow the Wolf's rules. A little premature celebration there. And one thing, they took something away from the character of Sir Stefan earlier in season 1. He, in Fire and Blood, is the one who steals Viserys' crown, sneaks it out of King's Landing, and brings it to Rhaenyra. He becomes her Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard. He's very special to her. And by just taking that away and giving it to Sir Eric instead, it added to his story and, his loss, but it did take away here. So, it's a zero-sum game.
It very much made Stefan Darkland a throwaway character, and I guess I understand why they want to consolidate certain things, because it certainly made Sir Eric's death much more impactful during that episode. But it was clearly framed to be a setup from the start with this one. My wife Caitlin and I were watching, and she looks over to me like, so is this guy just going to ride with them? No, he's dead. And I was like, no comments. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe he'll get better.
I don't want to be too harsh. I did like the little touch of him slicing his own throat.
The Dragon Rider, not Sir Stefan. Sir Stefan did not come correct. Yeah. We were talking about this briefly, but I love the Dragon Riders. I love the Dragon Tenders, like the Dragon Farmer hands. They're my favorite. I love them.
I had a lot of questions about them, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. What's their pay? What's the recruitment process, and what's the life expectancy?
This is like the equivalent. They're the equivalent of like horse girls in Westeros. They speak Valyrian, and they just want to work around dragons. They really like being around them. They're just animal people, and it's probably a lot steadier line of work if you can get it. Definitely a lot of job security because, well, obviously there are some risks that come with it. But that's why you carry your trusty Valyrian steel dagger to just get things done if push comes to shove. But being recruited to work there, you get steady access to food, all of the lamb bones you can gnaw on, and you get to see these mythical creatures. So for them, I imagine it's like almost quasi-religious, just based on the reverence we're having placed. Fun. Yes,
but we're having fun. But that's clearly the case. That this is they are essentially religious figures who
Yeah.
believe they're servicing their gods. And Sir Stefan Darkling says, like, the dragons are gods, which is something that we saw last week. And
Just meat.
you can go to, you can go to Nerdist. I wrote about this. This is one thing I think the show, in fairness to Game of Thrones, they didn't really have an opportunity to do
Right.
this because nobody for 200 years had 200 years had lived with dragons. Nobody really knew them. They were just weapons of mass destruction. They weren't around long enough for people to be awed by them. They only had a chance to be feared by them. But for the people of Westeros at this point, the gods, the dragons are like gods. They're like sacred. The Targaryens are too, because they're the only ones who can control them. And the show has done a great job showing the reverence that people have for these things, because as terrifying as they are, they're also majestic. They're magical. They're mystical. So I personally would find other ways to honor my dragon gods than work with them. But, more power to the dragon keepers.
Yeah, it's a noble order. It's a dying art, quite literally, as we see in this episode. We also get to see just how powerful dragons are. Once again, just the fact that Sir Stefan is just immediately barbecued, and the fact that all of these dragon tenders just need to make sure they keep a dagger on them at all times, just in case. That is their like, hey, you don't want to die horribly, so just make sure you have a backup plan. But that's only for dragons that have been captured and tamed and have riders, or can be ridden. We saw another. I do want to talk about Sea Smoke, but we saw an allusion to another large sheep-stealing dragon this episode too, in the Vale. So what were your thoughts about that? Because we'd been chatting a little bit about some dragons that we were hoping to see.
Yeah, I was hoping to see this dragon, and I have been, not under these circumstances. It's pretty clear that one of our big fears, and the fear of a lot of other people, seems to be coming true, that they are cutting out a major character. For those of you that have been with us here on Maesterminds, which has always been called since season 1 of House of the Dragon, you'll remember that we spent the whole season asking, where's Mushroom? Where's Mushroom? I don't think they're ever bringing Mushroom. The thing is, Mushroom is really fun, but he's not important to the story.
Exactly.
He's only important to the history of the story. They are cutting out a character who is very important to the story. I am shocked that they are doing this. I feel like the only fans of Fire and Blood who would do this are the people making the show. I don't think there's any, like, now maybe it does stuff. I'm not trying to be funny. I don't even know if we should say the character's name, because I don't want people to head out there.
Looking them up and then be disappointed.
Because if you look it up, if you look it up, it's also going to be a spoiler.
Yes.
But let's put it this way: they are taking a major character who plays a major role in not only the story, but in what other major people decide to do, and they are giving that story to Rhaena. That is very clear, and I keep saying, I know I keep referencing the butterfly effect. This is the biggest one yet. I have no idea what's going to happen now in certain circumstances, and I guess worried. I guess I'm a little worried about what it's going to mean going forward.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they are carving a new path, and I understand you have to consolidate certain characters and storylines, but I guess I don't agree that they need to necessarily excise this character. I think that they would add another dimension to the story that is very necessary, especially as it plays out in the long run, and speaks to, I think, a larger point they're trying to make with some of the schemes and plans they're doing here. But without spoiling anything, we'll shift our gears back to a dragon that we see explicitly this episode, and we know winds up with a rider by the end, and that is Sea Smoke, the dragon of the late Laenor Valerian, Rhaenyra's late husband, who may or may not be dead. We say late in scare quotes.
We got to get into this.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on how this played out, and just what we see from those delightful Hull boys over on in Spicetown and Driftmark?
Can we call Sea Smoke a Dromagon?
Yeah, Dramagon.
There it is. I knew we'd get there. Okay, calm down, Sea Smoke. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to go digging. I'm gonna have to go through the scrolls, Dan. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head if a dragon ever claimed a rider before. it's always a rider claiming a dragon, but Sea Smoke just poor lonely Sea Smoke. They're also in season 1. You used the phrase, "We alluded to this moment," which was if somebody claims Sea Smoke while Laenor is secretly alive, is that even possible? And you called it the Bluetooth dragon theory. And here it is. So, assuming that Laenor is still alive in Essos, that bond with his dragon should not be broken, even if they're far apart. Although, we've never had a situation like this. There's no recorded history of a dragon rider being separated from their dragon. Once they bond, they bond. It's almost like a demon in his Dark Materials. Like it's almost like a soul bond. So now we've seen Sea Smoke lonely, and what Sea Smoke does is the dragon flies out and finds Laenor's half brother. Almost like there's a connection there. I don't know what it means. I'm not necessarily worried about canon or anything like that. The show's doing its own thing, but it is a curious little bit if you do care about dragon lore, which I do.
Yeah, and just a reminder for people that don't know, the people we see over on Driftmark, that is Adam and Alan of Hull. And as they've made it pretty explicit at this point that they are...
Well, they finally confirmed it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when he's shaving his head so you don't see his shock of white Valerian/Targaryen hair. It's like, okay, we got it.
I like that.
That was a nice touch. That was a nice touch. I think they need, I think maybe I'm taking for granted that I've read the book and maybe it's not as clear in how they're presenting it, but clearly those two should have raised some eyebrows. I think people might have been more surprised by Adam, his brother, just being the one to also be of Targaryen/Valerian descent there, because they made that less clear. It's just sort of inferred based on how he talks to Alan of Hull. So I'm always a big fan of those two, and I've seen them so far this season. I was a little confused by the whole sequence where Adam is running away from Sea Smoke, and then just it was almost like the opposite of the Nazgul scene when they're by the side of the road in the Fellowship of the Rings, except this time he just peers down and is like, "Hey, do you want to be friends? Can you ride me?"
I think that they wanted that to be scary, as though he was at risk. And the way they end the episode, which is somebody has claimed Sea Smoke and Rhaenyra goes flying out without... I think we're supposed to, if you don't know the story at all, I think you're supposed to be on the edge of your seat, like, oh, did a green claim Sea Smoke? I mean, how much more obvious could it be?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't... There's no drama. I mean, unless you were, like, zoning out, there's no drama there. Like, they've been teasing the whole Adam and Sea Smoke thing. He keeps watching Sea Smoke fly in the air. What do we think happened there? Sea Smoke chased down Adam, killed him, disappeared, picked up a different rider from the Greens. Like, it was not a good ending.
No, it was
to this episode.
I think if they wanted to end on that dramatic beat, they should have ended with like Sea Smoke popping down in front of Adam, and then kind of like maybe have him like lean in, or like have Adam scream or something, then cut to black, and then next episode you start with the reports of that, and you have your answer, because you can deflate the tension then.
There's also obvious tension they could have leaned into, which is, okay, somebody who resents his father, Hand of the Queen, just became a dragon rider. What side is he going to?
Yes.
Right? Like, that's what they built towards, and then they just didn't do it. It was really bizarre, and for as much as I might not like certain things they do, at least there's usually some sort of tension there, especially if you don't know the story. I don't see how you can go into this not knowing anything and feel tension. This was not like I know something and other people don't. This was just not well done.
No, this was more clearly like, we got to get to the end of this episode so we can get to the cool stuff we have planned in the second to last episode of the season. We did get some moments that I thought worked well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's sort of connected to this, but let's talk about, let's shift away from the Dragon Riders, because it is it's tied up with what I want to talk about, and that is Rhaenyra and Mysaria, and their deepening relationship in this episode. Definitely It's very nice to see that Rhaenyra is taking Mysaria deeper and deeper into her confidence and like proving that she's someone she can trust. I was not expecting the makeout session at the end of that very heartfelt story, but it's Westeros and beyond. I guess it's just a horned up place, and they've spent a lot of time in that castle pent up together. But I was happy to see Mysaria's schemes bearing fruit, because that's when I get most excited in these episodes, is when I get to see some well-laid operation or skullduggery or information or misinformation campaign unfold in real time, which we saw that happen in this episode in a major way. So what were your thoughts on this, Mikey?
Let's take this one at a time.
Yeah, of course. I just dropped a lot of moments.
But I want to take it one at a time because I feel very differently about this. Two different things. I love the plan. I'm going to put some logistics questions aside. I just like the fact that there was a plan.
Yes,
and that she planted the seeds and then they sprouted, and it showed how quickly you can turn the propaganda machine to your favor.
Yeah.
Just a week ago, Rhaenyra the Cruel is a baby killer. And now Rhaenyra has not forgotten us. She's sending us food. She knows we need it.
Our Uber Eats has arrived. Instacart is here.
Yeah, and I really like that, and it was different. And this is where the show can do something special and fill in the gaps and give us these type of things and show some of these things that history might have forgotten. The other stuff with Rhaenyra and Mysaria, I didn't like. I didn't like it, even though, for those of you who have read George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, a female ruler suddenly making out with one of her female confidants out of nowhere is kind of a recurring trope, and it's one of my least favorite parts of the books. It always feels reductive. It feels like it sort of isn't earned. It doesn't feel true to the characters at times, and that's how I felt here when they started making out. Rhaenyra, and both on the show, but at least before this season, and in Fire and Blood, is a very sensuous person, right? She's I don't know, amorous, maybe not quite the right word, but you get my point. It just didn't work here for me at all. I hope it worked for you out there.
It didn't. It didn't really work for me. I'm fine if they want to build towards that. I just think that is something, for all of like the heel dragging they've done this season, that is something I wish they had built up a little bit more, because it definitely felt rushed in this episode. It was like I loved that moment of like honesty and vulnerability between them, and it just felt unexpected. And how it was deployed this episode. But, definitely interesting wrench throwing in the works. Maybe there's trying to set up sort of like another triangle or something with Daemon, Mysaria, and Rhaenyra, just in terms of like a tangled web the tangled webs we skeet. So I apologize for saying that in hindsight, but it's that's the show in a nutshell, to use some other questionable verbiage. I will say I do love Mysaria's character and how she is clearly an expert at what she does in terms of like, I will put aside, like you mentioned, questions of logistics for how did you make sure all of these boats landed on the beach, but that she clearly knew which threads to tug on to start to unravel the sweater here. And that was very cool to see. Like, I also loved seeing the framing earlier with the bread lines and people like in the marketplace not being able to buy groceries, and then seeing sheep being brought by in a wagon to feed the dragons. Especially, it's like, oh well, we saw one of these dragons die last episode, and now you're just gonna bring them all this food while we're starving? What the hell? King Viserys would never do this. He loved his wines and feasts, but not while the Smallfolk. That was a very funny sequence to me, Ulf being the absolute biggest goober in the world.
It's I kind of wish I could experience Ulf without knowing anything about Ulf, because I don't know if he's absolutely killing it or if he's Mr. Silly Tunes. Like, I cannot, and so I'm enjoying it. Like, that scene, they do a really good job of showing like exactly why people would be upset, even if it's it definitely, I think, at minimum, kind of borders on goofy. But it's propaganda and it's wartime and people are desperate. So maybe it rings totally true. I don't know. We haven't been in that situation.
No, I mean, it is. I think if you just say something loudly enough and confidently enough, people, and it like speaks to insecurities or worries that people are having, it takes root, and they're like, yeah, that person's making a lot of sense. I mean, see also. Any cable news channel or any sort of, just go on Twitter and you'll just see some people just spouting nonsense, and a lot of people are reacting to it in a way that might be unexpected. So if you're just speaking to anxieties with a loud enough voice and you sound like you know what you're talking about, people will go along with it. Whether or not they're intelligent, whether or not they think they have a good head on their shoulders, at a certain point, if you're hungry, if you're feeling powerless, if you're feeling disenfranchised, it is easy to sort of lean into this sort of strong rhetoric. And I think we see that absolutely playing out here. I know it's maybe played for a slightly humorous effect here with Ulf. Maybe he's there to sort of like take a little bit of the edge off, but because to me, he's just an absolute clown show every time we've seen him so far. He's just immediately cowed the first time he boasts about his heritage. This time he's just like, hey, this soup is too thin. I need beer. Huh? Yeah, you're right. The king is not doing right by us. But I love how all of this comes to a head when we see another person we've spent some time with walking through the city, Hugh, and it basically turns from Hugh going out to find groceries into a full-scale riot as people are rioting over a limited amount of groceries and food supplies being dropped into the city by Rhaenyra. Hugh just goes sicko mode and punches that guy and steals his cabbage. And then what we see unfold at the Sept with Alicent and Helena. That sequence was, I thought, very well done, because it had me very worried for a moment there. And even though I knew, okay, well, yeah, these characters need to make it through this sequence, but when they were up against the wall surrounded by a throng of people, I did have a moment where I'm like, oh, are they going off book in a way I didn't expect? So what were your thoughts on this whole food riot sequence?
Really well done. This is the franchise, something that most shows can't do, which is this scale of cast and sense of place. Like, one thing that I've always loved, even at the end with Game of Thrones, it always felt big. It always looked good. The production never took a dip. It's also really funny to me that Aegon's idiotic decision to name his unqualified moron friends to the Kingsguard really comes back to hurt other people. Why are you rushing the two queens out of the big sept, where there's probably places to hide, out into the public? Like, that was really stupid, but it was fine. It was characters being stupid because they are stupid. It was the good kind of stupid. And the Queen of Fishes, and it's gonna. I'm sorry. You're living in King's Landing. There's no meat. There's no food. Stupid dragons are fighting over a chair, and you get to hit one of the royals in the face with a fish. That's just gotta. I mean, how long are you living off of that story?
Yeah,
right.
It's also
the rest of your life.
It's also like how it speaks to how unhappy they are if they're willing to throw the little groceries they do have at the royals. Because it's like, even if the food is going bad, like we've seen people buying spoiled food because they need something. So the fact that poor Alicent gets dinged by a mackerel is definitely adding insult to injury. But then they add injury to insult by chopping off that poor Smallfolk's hand, which just turns things up to 11. Like, from there, stuff goes crazy. Like, the choreography and like the blocking of that sequence had me like very tense. Like, it was that meme you see of someone sitting up in their chair. I was just like, oh, what's going to happen now? And that White Cloak who chopped off the hand gets absolutely wrecked. Like, that guy super dead. It reminded me of descriptions in the book where you just hear of these people being torn apart, because that's what it looks like. He's just getting stabbed 100 times.
We got to go back. We got to go back to that arm being chopped off.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a chance. Here's what I'll say. There's a chance that character is coming back.
Ooh.
There's a chance, and there's a chance we already saw him earlier in the season, and we talked about this at the time.
Oh man.
If you've read Fire and Blood, you know exactly who I'm talking about. You're freaking out right now. You're excited.
Wake up,
if you
sheeple.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, just get really, really excited. And then next season, when they disappoint us, I'll tell you why we're all disappointed.
Oh no! Well,
I'm just sorry. We did this with Blood and Cheese. We teased it all season one, and then it happened, and we just wanted to, walk into the Blackwater and disappear.
They haven't been teasing it as aggressively as Blood and Cheese with all of the rats in every single episode last season.
I miss the rats.
Yeah,
bring back the rats.
Oh, I mean, they'll be back. Don't worry. They hung all the rat catchers. They hanged all of them, so they're dead and gone.
They didn't. Otto, after Aegon in Fire and Blood, Otto hires, gets all these cats.
A bunch of cats.
Yeah, he gets. Where are the cats?
I mean, that would be.
Bring us the cats.
That would be a very funny episode. They bring Otto back, then we just get a slow motion sequence, a bunch of kittens running around the Red Keep. That would be wonderful.
I mean, they could keep bringing back one dog. Maybe we can save a little bit of the dog budget for some cats.
Yeah, I love all of the fans out there. I've seen some photoshops of the dog on the Iron Throne being like, "This is the ending the people really want." And yeah, that he's our own Jurassic Bark storyline there, where he's just going to be waiting and waiting for his poor master Cheese, who will never come home. But hopefully he finds a better owner. Or I was worried when I saw Hugh, I think, bend down to pet a dog this episode. I was like, he's not gonna snatch the dog to serve to his family, right? Because I was like, how desperate are they? How desperate are they?
Yeah.
Because
his daughter's skin is literally gray.
Yes.
Is that good? Probably. I would think my dying daughter's skin is gray. It's time to eat a dog is reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all make decisions we're not proud of when we're hungry. That's why they invented the Snickers. That won't happen until the time of Game of Thrones. So, we'll have to wait for that. We'll have to wait for that in Westeros history. Yeah.
People don't know Snickers. The origins was somebody's daughter was gray.
Yes, and Maester Snickles came along years later, and we finally got that tasty treat. But unfortunately for now, all they have is throwing fish and a bowl of the brown.
And now Hugh has one thing of carrots.
Yeah, he has some cabbage too. I saw some cabbage or lettuce in there, so he can make a salad. Eating healthy, probably the nutrition that he needs and his family needs. But let's talk about, let's shift our focus away from the Smallfolk and talk about someone else who's worried about eating questionable things. Unfortunately, folks, we cannot be free for 1 hour from the constant refrain of Daemon, Daemon, Daemon. This storyline, you mentioned it earlier, Mikey, it is really losing my interest. It's wearing out its welcome. I am just harrowed, Hall, by how much time we're spending with old Dreamin' Targaryen. It's just give me something else. Stop showing me all of your sad family member dreams at this point and do literally anything. What are your thoughts on this, Mikey?
I am not as down on the Harrenhal stuff this week for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't have to see him having sex with his mom. Huge improvement.
I thought he was going to have sex with Viserys. I was fully ready for him to have a weird, sexy Viserys dream.
Okay, let's move.
No, let's go back.
I liked the fact. I think that these dreams are sort of. I think the dreams this week are sort of giving us a little bit of focus on all the dreams.
Yes,
which is that we see the first one is the day that his brother named Rhaenyra his heir.
Yeah.
And that was that. All of the stuff happening now starts in that moment, all because Daemon was just a selfish jerk. And Daemon, you can't still be mad about this, right? He knows his brother was right. He knows he was wrong. And this moment right here has defined his entire life since then. And the whole thing with him being locked in, I love that because he's been locked in this moment. He has never been able to escape this mistake. This is the one thing that has haunted him. And it's caused so much bloodshed already and more to come. And then we see the second dream later, which is he has a dream where he did the right thing, where he went to his grieving brother during his time of need. And I think the first reason I'm not as down in the Harrenhal stuff this week is I think it's we're coming to the end of it.
We have to. There's only 2 episodes left.
But we see Daemon is acknowledging his sins and his mistake, and we are seeing him. He's falling apart because he's dealing with emotions he has never allowed himself to feel. He's never actually really addressed his anger. He's never addressed his sadness, his loneliness. He's never addressed the guilt that he knows he has and that he is responsible for and the mistakes he has made. And I really did enjoy that stuff. I think it made Daemon more interesting after they had kind of made him pretty boring the last few weeks. We said one note, right?
Yes.
He was one note. There were more notes this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think my complaint is I appreciated the like you mentioned, the context and the texture of those dreams because of what they add to Daemon's character and just sort of really underscore this sort of dream nightmare journey he's been on. It's just that should have been maybe 2 episodes max, in my opinion, because really, like, I think about The Sopranos and I think about the episode where Tony goes to Vegas and does mescaline and like goes on this like spiritual journey. And I think that's like the best parallel for what I think. But that was 1 episode. I feel like you give this 2 max for all of these dream sequences because it really feels like they're just like running through mud, and it is just. I'm running out of patience. I feel like
it's only fitting though, right?
Yeah,
only fitting. He's running through mud in the Riverlands.
I know. I think they use that exact phrase this episode, but I feel like Caraxes just like patiently waiting for something to happen, just bored out of my mind when we go back to Harrenhal. And I do like certain things we have here. Like Daemon's mental state has eroded to the point of just like weeping at the drop of a hat. And the only person he seems to be able to trust is our girl Alice Rivers.
Our girl.
This is the other reason. The jump scare with the barn owl. I was like, oh my god.
This is the other reason I did not have as big an issue with the Harrenhal stuff this week, because she is the stuff she gets to do this week is so much better than last week. She's fantastic. We've talked about this. They are leaning into the unknown of Alice Rivers. Everything she does can be explained simply by an observant, smart woman who knows her stuff. It can also be explained by witch.
Yes.
And even the whole stuff with, they definitely kind of, I think they lean more towards she went to Riverrun and killed Lord Tully.
It seems that.
But watching it the second time, there's definitely the possibility raised that she just knew he was going to die in 3 days anyway because she knows stuff.
Yeah.
And that she went there to ease his pain, or she went there to earn Daemon's trust.
Yeah.
Well, but because Daemon is very happy when he finds out. And he thinks at the very least, he thinks that she went there and killed him, and that's why she said the winds will change in 3 days. He doesn't know what we do, which is that there might be more going on with her.
I do like that they keep it ambiguous. I think that's the most effective use of her character. She has this line where she says something like, "There are older things in this world than you or I or living memory. You're not a player, but a piece on the board, as am I for that matter." It would make it feel like they're both part of this like grander scheme in the works. And we sort of talked about the magic that suffuses the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, and that to me has been played up excellently this season. And I like that we don't know, did she just augur this from the wind because they whispered it to her? Did she go there to do it herself and make sure it happened? But you're right, by her actually going there, that just solidifies Daemon's probably absolute trust in her. And hopefully will help bring Daemon back into the fold a little bit, because Rhaenyra seems pretty convinced that Daemon has gone rogue and is no longer on her side. But Alice seems to just constantly be questioning and poking at Daemon's motivations and being like, what, you're not going to you're going to betray her. You're not going to support her. What are you doing, man? What do you think you're doing here? So I think that she is becoming one of the most important characters on the show. I'm curious how long they're going to keep her around through the rest of this season and into next. So that'll remain to be seen. That is my like sort of butterfly effect wondering of how she's going to continue to evolve.
And we really should take a moment to also mention that a lot of the Harrenhal stuff is being salvaged by the great Sir Simon Strong, who is so good. When Daemon really freaks out on him, he is so good in that moment. He's calm. He also recognizes, like, he's lived at Harrenhal. Yes. He knows things happen here and it messes with people.
Oh, you're sleeping in the spooky bed.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We put you in the most haunted room. Yeah. That was on me. He stays cool under pressure. He recognizes that Daemon kind of is freaking out with good cause. Mm-hmm. But there's also this moment, I suggest people go back and watch it, when he comes to tell Daemon about Lord Tully's death. He gives a little smile. And I'm not sure if it's because he knows that Alice might have killed him or simply that now we can go, right?
Yes.
Like he does not want to support the Greens. Daemon is questioning it. I do not. Because he said his Larys murdered his father and brother. Yeah. He's not our lord, and Larys is with the Greens. So is that smile because he knows Alice did something that benefits them, or is he just happy because here we go? Because as we heard Alice say, like the river lords are mud. They would rather be stuck fighting each other, and the only thing that ever holds them together is the stability of House Tully, mm-hmm. who is not the richest, who is not able to call together the biggest army. We've talked about that. Their bannermen can call much bigger armies than they can, but House Tully is at least reasonable. They are not these stubborn mules. They are capable of leading, and that I love that little moment from Sir Simon Strong. I love Sir Simon Strong, and every scene he is in, there is at least a floor for how bad it can be, because even if we don't like what's going on with the people around him, we're always enjoying him.
Yes, anytime he walks on screen, I'm happy. He's just always additive, whether it's to just provide a counterbalance to Daemon or just say something so pithy that he's just delightful, especially with how matter-of-fact he is. He is used to walking on eggshells, and he does it very deftly, especially around this increasingly unstable dragon rider who has delusions of grandeur and a very complicated relationship with his family and the crown. So I love me some Sir Simon, and that's a great transition point to talk about our MVP of the episode. Mikey, who is your MVP for this episode?
Dan, as always, I don't know what this means, so I've got two.
Okay.
I've got my acting MVP goes to Matthew Needham for all the stuff we talked about. Alice Rivers is my character MVP. Mm-hmm. I just love the way Daemon is just drawn to her, and he doesn't question it.
Yes.
He just doesn't question it. Who is this woman who gave him some sort of potion that made him black out and who might be giving him nightmares and is talking about stuff like he never even questions, how do you know any of this stuff about me? How do you know what was going on in Pentos? How do you know about my mom? Right? He's just drawn to her, and she might have just brought together the Riverlands. She might have killed Lord Paramount. I don't know.
Who can say?
She also could be an owl. A lot going on there. I love her. She's the best.
It was very smart of her to show her holding an owl, because that'll show owl truthers off the scent. Like, why would an owl be holding another owl? The truth is out there, and we will find it on the next episode. For my MVP, I am going to give it to, I want to say Aemond, not because I support his actions, but because I thought he had the most dynamic presence this episode, just in terms of how he shook up the game board, because he came in hot with some big, strategic plays. Now some of them aren't going super well. He's really encountering some resistance that he's maybe not expecting or not ready to deal with in a thoughtful way. But the way he's pushing Kristen Cole away, the way he's trying to bring Otto Hightower back into the fold, that super tense and uncomfortable showdown of sorts, the quiet showdown between him and Aegon, the just subtle application of force, putting pressure on his poor brother's wounds and then leaving the speaking stone with him. And then just he just really made a huge impact this episode in a way that is going to have, I think, major reverberation throughout the rest of the season. So I'm very curious what's going to happen there, and that's why he's my MVP. As we move on towards the end of the episode, are there any other moments or Easter eggs or items we didn't get to that you think bear mentioning?
Yeah, let's go bullet list real fast here. I liked seeing Corlys bringing Alan into the fold. With Adam hating it, only to then see Adam become a dragon rider. I thought that was really good. One of the people who helps Mysaria's plan is the prostitute that Aemon embarrassed.
Yes.
She's the one working with Diana. That was great. And once again, you have to understand things you do have consequences. He embarrassed her after she, was very kind to him for all those years. The slap heard around Dragonstone of Lord Bartimos. I'm curious if they're swapping storylines with him and somebody else that we will get into in the future. I don't have any sympathy for Aegon for a lot of reasons, but, Aemon is a real monster. I love Maester Orwyle, who is really smart and seems like a genuinely good person who's really stuck in an impossible situation.
Oh, yeah.
And in Fire and Blood, it's not clear because of how the history is written and whether or not he is presented that way sort of as propaganda, but to me, it always read that he was. We talked about Otto. I'm very curious where he is because this is a show creation. We did hear something, though, that goes back to decisions Otto made. House Beesbury has taken up arms against the Hightower house because Criston Cole killed their lord the night the Green stole the crown. That was the old man, the master of coin, who spoke on Rhaenyra's behalf, and Criston Cole smashed his head and killed him. Actions have consequences, and now the Beesburys are fighting back. One thing we didn't get to, Dan, that I want to take a quick second. I loved the conversation between Alicent and her brother Gwaine.
Yes.
It revealed a lot about each of them, their family, but most importantly, we get some amazing characterization for her son, who we have never seen on the show.
Yeah.
Darren is somebody that people were afraid was not going to be included the way that Maelor was left off. That was the youngest son of Aegon and Helena. Darren is around. We learn a lot about him, and I'm excited to see him. I also like, this is something, I'm such a nerd, I know. I really like the vocabulary that they give Gwaine Hightower. It's great characterization. It's really rich and it's really advanced, and it's really good writing. It makes him sound different.
Yeah, it's a different environment that he would come up in being at Old Town, and definitely makes sense. Like, it's a more scholarly city, I imagine. It's like a college town, basically, except
it's where the Citadel is.
Yes. Except fewer townies and more ancient people just chiseling off grayscale from poor Jorah Mormont. But no, I agree. The other thing I wanted to mention was Helena talking about her bugs when she comes in. She's like, this one stopped singing. And my hackles are always up whenever she is just muttering to herself or talking to herself in her room, especially about animals, because it's never good news. It always augurs something poor.
Did you think that was foreshadowing, or do you think it was reflective of Aegon's current state? Because that was what I wasn't sure about.
I mean, to me, I usually take it as foreshadowing because I don't know. I didn't take it as Aegon's current state because, if anything, he is more lucid this episode and able to respond. Because I would be more if she said, "Oh, this one started singing like a cicada or something," or started screaming, I would then it'd be like, "Oh yeah, that bug is Aegon." But this, I think, it's definitely something that is going to come to pass. Maybe a song of Ice and Fire, or maybe only one half of that. They're going to get the fire half.
By the way, speaking of Aegon, probably a bad job by us not mentioning Tom Glencarney, who is just like been a revelation this season.
Oh, yeah.
He does so little in season one, and every chance he gets this season, he is absolutely incredible. He is burnt in a bed. He can barely speak, and what he's doing in this episode is so good. I'm really just always impressed by the casting. HBO, nobody casts shows like HBO, and this is really good. And they also do a great job letting us know Alicent was a terrible mother, including when she says it and her own brother says the funniest line of the episode, "I'm sure you did your best."
Look, 1 out of 4 ain't bad.
Dan, we're both dads. Imagine if, like, we're like, oh, I don't think I did a good job. And someone goes, well, I'm sure you did your best.
Yeah. It'd be like if I sent my son to go foster on Cape Cod and be like, how fares the boy? Like, what are you talking about?
If someone ever says to me as a dad, I'm sure you did your best, I'm going to try to mount sea smoke.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the nearest dragon? Like, I'm just going to... Or I'll just split the difference and walk directly into the sea. It's probably just easier that way. I'm sure you tried. Ouch. Ouch. Major ouch. All right, folks. With that family failure at our heels, that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you joining us for this breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6. We're going to be here all season long, which is almost over, and we'll also have plenty of deep dives into Hot D lore waiting for you over on Nerdist.com. Now, speaking of Nerdist, Mikey, where can people find you to send you a digital raven on the internet?
Twitter, Blue Sky, Burger Mike, all one word. Or, of course, you can always find me at the greatest website anybody ever created, Nerdist.com.
Amazing. You can also find me on said website or online at Dan Casey. Now, folks, thank you again. But in the meantime, we have to know, tell us, what did you think of this episode? What was your favorite moment and why? Let us know in the comments. And for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.